Hi everyone, this is Miss Longley, and today we're going to be learning about photosynthesis. We're going to be covering objectives 4 and 6. So we will be looking at the equation of photosynthesis and looking at the flow of energy, as well as the role of chloroplasts and chlorophyll pigments in that process. So let's go ahead and get started. So here's just the general overview of photosynthesis and how the flow of energy works in this process only. So photosynthesis is the process in which autotrophs, so plants, algae, are using to store light energy that the autotroph has captured from the sun to make or build glucose molecules, and those are sugars. So we're taking the light energy, capturing it, and using it to make glucose. So this is a process that only autotrophs use. One thing to keep in mind is that glucose itself is not energy. Rather, the sunlight energy that was captured is now being stored in the form of chemical energy, and it is now found in the bonds. So keep that in mind. All right, go ahead and locate your packet. We're going to be filling out this section here on the process of photosynthesis. So as I go through the rest of the notes, just make sure that you write these things down. All right, so where does photosynthesis happen? So I'm going to move my little profile picture over here. There we go. And this happens in the chloroplast. So we have learned about chloroplasts in our previous unit. Chloroplasts are found only in autotrophs. So these are your plants, your producers. They're using this process to capture light energy to make glucose. So I'm going to back up just one more time. Right here in this picture, you can see an outline that kind of looks like kind of a rigid structure. This tells me that it is a plant cell because I can see the cell wall. Another dead giveaway is that I can see these green little discs. These are the chloroplasts. So plant cells have more than one chloroplast, just as like they have more than one mitochondria. So you can actually visibly see them under the microscope. So let's take a look at the equation of photosynthesis. And now this will look very familiar to you because it is very similar to cell respiration. It's just the reverse with a few little changes. So for photosynthesis to happen, we need these reactants. We need these two molecules, carbon dioxide, 6 of them. So carbon dioxide is a gas in the atmosphere. Water, which is a molecule, and water can either be in liquid form or it can also be in the vaporized form, so a gas. And then we also need light from the sun, very important. Now with these reactants, photosynthesis is able to make these two products. Glucose is the big one. So glucose is the molecule in which we are storing that light energy that the chloroplasts have captured, and that's now being stored in the form of glucose in the bonds. The other product that is produced is more so a waste product. It's not actually needed for photosynthesis to occur, and that's oxygen. So oxygen is released out of the chloroplast, and it will be later used in the process of cell respiration, which you learned about the previous day. So 2 things to keep in mind. Light energy is being transferred now in the form of chemical energy in the bonds of glucose. But where did we get this carbon from? Where did the carbon come from? Well, carbon came from the carbon dioxide molecules. Remember these gray things right here? Those are carbon molecules, and they are now being used to build the molecule glucose. So photosynthesis is building a molecule. Cell respiration, you're actually breaking down glucose to release that energy from the bonds. All right, so we've seen this picture before. Throwing it back to ecology, we learned that there are certain processes that add or contribute carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. And there's really only one process that actually removes carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. And that process is photosynthesis. So photosynthesis is the only way that we can remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. So what's happening in that process? Photosynthesis is using the carbons from carbon dioxide to build the glucose molecule. And I'm going to move my picture over here. And photosynthesis captures the light energy from the sun to store in the bonds of glucose. So that is why we definitely need carbon dioxide, and we definitely need that light energy, because that is how we're going to be making glucose and storing that new form of energy. So let's check your notes and see if they're complete. So what organelle is photosynthesis taking place? That is the chloroplast. What are the inputs / reactants? That is carbon dioxide and water plus sunlight. What are the outputs or products? That is glucose and oxygen. And you'll notice if you look down below from your cell respiration, they're basically the reverse with just a few minor changes. That's the cool thing about photosynthesis and cell respiration. They work hand in hand. All right, so let's see, how does this work in flow of energy in terms of just an autotroph cell? So one thing to keep in mind that autotrophs use both processes of photosynthesis and cell respiration. So we're going to be finding chloroplasts and mitochondria in a plant or autotroph's cell. So what happens first? Photosynthesis. So we're going to be capturing the sunlight energy. It's going to go into the chloroplast. The chloroplast is going to transfer that energy and store it in the bonds of glucose. So chloroplasts are going to make glucose. Glucose molecule is then going to be sent to the mitochondria, and the mitochondria is going to be using cell respiration to recharge the ATP molecules. So remember, ATP, when it's not charged, it's ADP with a D. And to recharge it back up to 100%, we have to add that extra phosphate. How do we do that? Well, we got to break down the bonds in the glucose molecule. Now, it's not super efficient, like we learned in the ecology unit. Only about 10% of the energy that's stored in the bonds of glucose actually makes it to be used in that rechargeable form of ATP. 90% of the energy in the bonds are actually lost as heat. So that's why we have this over here. I'm going to move my picture. So again, from ecology, we learned that 90% is lost as heat. 10% is actually being transferred in usable form of ATP. So big takeaway here, autotrophs use both processes. They have to do photosynthesis first to make glucose, and then they use cell respiration second to actually break down that glucose and recharge their ATP molecules. All right, so switching gears a little bit, this is looking at objective number 6. Why are plants green? So here's why. Chloroplast, remember, is the organelle, and it contains these pigments, so like ink kind of in a form. So two very common ones are chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B, and these are pigments that absorb only a certain wavelength of light. So these chloroplasts are going to be absorbing all the colors except for yellow and green. So if you remember back to your Roy G. Biv days, you know that white light contains all the wavelengths of colors. So Roy G. Biv. Chloroplasts will absorb all of those wavelengths except for the color green and a little bit of yellow. So why are they green? Well, you're actually seeing the reflection. So the reason why plants appear green is because that is the one wavelength of light that is entering in the chloroplast and actually bouncing right back, and that is what we visually see. So that is why green plants appear green to our eyes. So let's take a look at this graph here, because this is going to explain a little bit more about what colors are being absorbed and what colors are not. So this graph is showing you what wavelength is being absorbed. You can tell by the peaks that you see. Anything that is a valley, so like down here, this is showing you colors or wavelengths that are not going to be absorbed. Rather, they are going to be reflected. Reflected is what you see. Absorbed is what you don't see. So we have three pigments here, chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B, and then we have a third one here that is called carotenoids. So looking at these peaks, so for example, chlorophyll A peaks right about here. So if we look directly below, it kind of appears in the wavelength that's like a purplish indigo color. If you look like way over here, it also peaks again, that same pigment, chlorophyll A, and it's peaking kind of in the reddish orange wavelength. So pause the video, and what I want you to do is figure out what colors of light are being absorbed that will work best for photosynthesis. Remember, we need to capture as much sunlight as possible in order to make glucose. And then what colors are being reflected, therefore they are not going to be used in the process of photosynthesis. So go ahead and pause the video, think about what colors those are, and then you can press play and we'll find out. All right, so hopefully you're able to figure those out. Let's reveal the answers. So the colors that work the best for photosynthesis, meaning that they are being absorbed, we see peaks, are the colors purple. This also correlates to black light as well. So that's chlorophyll A right here. If you look directly down, there's that purple color. Blue is another one. So chlorophyll B actually absorbs the most blue wavelength light. And then orange, if you look over here with chlorophyll B, it peaks a little bit above that wavelength orange. And then lastly, we have chlorophyll A again. It's peaking right in the red. So these are the four best colors to use for photosynthesis if you want to make the most glucose, or in terms of plants making the most glucose. Colors that are not going to be the best, meaning that they're going to be reflected and not used at all, are these two colors. Oops. So green and yellow. How do I know? Well, if I look way down here, this is where these valleys are, where there's no peaks at all. And this tells me that the color green and the color yellow are actually going to be bouncing back off the chloroplast, not absorbed at all, not going to be stored in the form of glucose. And so those are the worst wavelengths to give a plant because they're just going to be bouncing right back and not used in that process. All right, that is it for this screencast. Go ahead and move on to the next one, part 2. See you then.